I grew up in Kansas City and absolutely hated it. I mean, I could not wait to get out of Kansas City. And so I moved to Denver in 2011 and never looked back. And the entire time that I lived there, I said over and over and over again, I'll never move back to Kansas City. Lo and behold, here comes 2020, pandemic hits us, and we're back in Kansas City. But in this video, I'm going to be discussing the 5 things that I hate about living in Kansas City. Stay tuned. Now, full disclosure, I grew up on the Kansas side, and I think part of my resentment towards Kansas City had a lot to do with the part of Kansas City in which I grew up, but that's a story for another day. So the first thing that I don't care for about living in Kansas City is the property taxes. Living in Denver for almost 10 years, that's where I bought my first home, and I had no idea how property taxes even worked, but they didn't really affect me that much in Colorado because Colorado has some of the lowest property taxes in the entire country, and I didn't realize the impact that property taxes could have on your mortgage payment until I bought a home in Kansas City. Now, if you've done any research about Kansas City, or if you're a resident of Kansas City, you're probably aware of the huge increase in property tax assessments that we've undergone over the past 4 years. And frankly, I was shocked in 2021 when I underwent a 60% increase in my property taxes, and at the end of the year, realized that I was about $5,000 short in my escrow account and didn't have the cash to cover. And so what happens is, if you don't have the cash to cover your property taxes at the end of the year after one of these huge increases, well, they just roll it into your mortgage payment. And at the time I was like, nah, no big deal. But then 2 years later, my property taxes are going up again. My mortgage payment has gone up around $500 a month since I moved and bought my house in Kansas City. But the one thing that you need to understand if you're considering buying a home in Kansas City is property taxes are above average here. So it's about a 1.4% tax rate for the property taxes versus in Colorado, I was used to a 0.6% tax rate. So make sure that you're factoring in property taxes when you're budgeting a move to Kansas City. The second thing I hate about Kansas City is how car-centric it is. So it is spread out. And again, living in Denver for 10 years, I got accustomed to the light rail system. Now, I will admit that I don't use public transportation all that much because my job requires me to be in a car anyway. And I grew up in a suburb that was pretty far from downtown and had no public transportation whatsoever. So that's just what I'm used to. However, if you're coming from a city like Denver, like Seattle, like Chicago, where they have these intricate light rail systems and public transportation options, well, Kansas City just doesn't have very much of that. We do have a streetcar, which is being extended. It's supposed to be completed in 2025. But even still, it's only going to go down Main Street from Berkeley Riverfront Park to the Country Club Plaza. Outside of that, we do have a bus line, but that's mainly centered around southern Kansas City. Up north, they did just introduce Iris, which is kind of like an Uber specifically designed for people who live north of the river. However, for the most part, Kansas City's public transportation options are lackluster. Now, my name's Kyle. I'm a licensed real estate agent. I'm licensed on the Missouri and the Kansas side. And if you're considering moving to Kansas City, buying or selling a home here, my team and I would love to assist you. So make sure you shoot us an email at info@movingtokc.net. And also, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel as we're putting out new content every single week about eating, sleeping, living, and playing right here in Kansas City. The third thing that I don't care for about living in Kansas City is the extreme weather. Now, for the most part, the weather doesn't bother me with the exception of the winter time. I don't care for winter. I don't like the cold. And in Kansas City, we have a bone-chilling cold. Now, my family are like, didn't you live in Denver for 10 years? But they forget that Denver is a dry climate. So the cold there just hits different than it does here in the Midwest. You don't get that bone-chilling cold like you do here in Kansas City. Plus, you get 300 days of sunshine. So it wasn't uncommon for it to be 35 degrees in Denver, but being able to wear a t-shirt because the sun is so powerful, and we'd get a foot of snow and a day later it's gone. Whereas here, we pretty much get freezing rain. We don't get a ton of snow. We get tornadoes. Just last week, we had a microburst come through. It broke a bunch of tree limbs. It actually uprooted some trees where they completely covered roads, fell on houses, crushed cars. So we get all the extremes. And then in the summertime, we do get 100% humidity, mosquitoes. It's a whole thing. So if you're moving here from a different climate, I would suggest visiting in one of the extreme seasons that we have here, whether it be in June or July in the summer or in December, January in the winter, so you can get a full feel for what the weather is really like here in Kansas City. Number 4 on the list, I gotta address the elephant in the room, which is the crime. If you're doing any research on Kansas City, well, then it's no secret that we have a lot of violent crime that takes place in our city. Now, I will say that it is concentrated for the most part to the city, and we have a lot of clients that are moving here and they're mainly looking at the suburbs. But what I always recommend for our clients is to pull up the crime map on neighborhoodscout.com, and I'm actually going to do that for you here. This is a map of the crime rates. It also has the safest neighborhoods in Kansas City over here to the right, but it's going to show you where the majority of the crime is. As a real estate agent, I'm not necessarily able to steer you in any direction, so you got to do the research for yourself and make sure that you're informed. Another thing that I really like about this site is it'll also give you neighborhood overviews. So if you go in here and just click on one of the neighborhoods, it'll give you a full summary of real estate prices, the people in the area, the diversity, the neighbors, the languages, the ethnicity, and also transportation, getting to and from work. So it's a great resource. But look, I think that a big reason that the crime is such an issue here in Kansas City is the Kansas City Police Department is actually run at the state level. And so there's this huge disconnect between the actual city of Kansas City and the police department. Now, I think there are some efforts to try and resolve some of those issues, and we did actually just introduce a new police chief, and she's coming up with some innovative ideas on some things that we can do around the crime and how to curb that through community policing and these other alternatives, because what they've been doing obviously just isn't working. But again, I'll reiterate, make sure you use the resources available and do your own research to make sure you're educated about the best neighborhood for you and your family. And the number 5 thing that I hate about Kansas City, and this is time specific, so where we are at historically, and this is me putting my real estate hat on for a moment, is the inventory here in Kansas City. We have reached a level of unaffordability. Now, if you're moving from the West Coast, like a California, an Arizona, a Las Vegas, we help clients from all of those areas. They come to Kansas City and they look at the prices and they're like, this is not expensive, right? Even me coming from Denver, moving to Kansas City 3 years ago, I was like, wait, I can get this house for this amount of money? That's amazing. But the one thing that's going on here in Kansas City is we are facing historically low inventory levels. And when we pull up the graph here, we can see that inventory for June was 3,357 homes for sale. Now, if we look at last July, that's down by over 25%, where we had 4,695 homes for sale in July of 2022. And what this has led to is a highly competitive market for buyers. So if we look at this historical chart here, you can see the green line represents resale homes. And I like to focus on that just because this blue line is for new construction, and new construction is pretty much back at pre-pandemic levels. Whereas for resale, you can see back here in 2020 when the pandemic hit, we topped out around 5,000 listings for resale that year, just a little over. And it was in February before everything was absolutely crazy. Now, if you look at pre-pandemic levels, we haven't even come close to that over the last 3 years. The last 2 years, we've topped out around 5,000 listings for resale. in 2021 and 2022. But what is concerning for me is here in 2023, we're just completely flatlined. We are not seeing this usual peak of inventory that we see in the summer months. In fact, we're down by about 50% for inventory levels for 2023. And that has created a highly competitive market for buyers. And it's something that you definitely need to know if you're considering buying a home in Kansas City. So look, for the most part, I absolutely love living in Kansas City. I didn't so much when I grew up here, and I think that that's pretty common. The grass is always greener, and I enjoyed my time in Denver, but I am proud to call myself a Kansas Citian, and I absolutely love it here. And we'd love to help you if you're considering moving to, buying, or selling a home right here in Kansas City. So if that's you, shoot us an email at info@movingtokc.net. And if you haven't done so already, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel, as we're putting out new videos every single week about living right here in Kansas City. Until next time.